Greetings, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea Tranquility. Welcome to another edition of Questions and Answers. Today is Sunday, September the 8th. We've got a selection of questions that you guys have submitted over the last week that I have picked out to answer today. If one of your questions has not been chosen today, fear not, does not mean that your question was terrible. It just basically means that, and in fact, there were a lot of them this week. They were questions that basically have been asked and answered before, or very, very similar, okay? Or, so there were a couple like, hey, Pete, do you like this album? Okay, so in a lot of instances, I kind of skip over those. I like to pick questions that at least can have me talking for a couple of minutes about whatever it might be. So, and I'm trying to make these a little shorter, so I've kind of limited the amount of questions today, but we got some good ones, so let me dive right in. First question is from Skallagrimmer Kvoltfulson, okay? He asks, hi Pete, I'd like to know if you think that Days of Future Past by the Moody Blues is an early prog album, and if so, what makes it an early example of prog from your point of view? Thank you so much. Okay, yeah, I absolutely think that Days of Future Past is an early prog rock album. You probably won't get many people that will debate that question, right? For me, the Moody Blues were a little bit different than, say King Crimson, Genesis, yes, ELP, what have you, is that in that they never were big on all these, really technical, intricate, time changes and counterpoint and all that kind of stuff. But where I think that Moody Blues fit in, well, they featured a Mellotron, right? There you have it. End the question. No. Yeah, well, they were one of the first, one of the first bands. They were not the first, but one of the first bands to actually use Mellotron in their songs to kind of recreate or mimic an orchestra. But I think for me, the roots of progressive rock, tied into that whole symphonic nature. Symphonic rock, prog rock go hand in hand. And I think that the Moody Blues were excelled at kind of adding those symphonic elements, whether they used a real orchestra or they used the Mellotron to kind of create that kind of symphony, that symphonic nature that we always kind of, included when we think about prog rock. Okay, in addition, a lot of their lyrical content, a lot of conceptual themes and ideas, again, the infancies of prog rock. Okay, naive prog rock perhaps, but I always thought that because, the Moody Blues were not a straight rock band. You could call them in certain aspects kind of a pop band, but not. They weren't really psychedelic, right? They were something different at that time. I think you could also talk about Procol Harum in the same breath there. Both of those bands were doing very different music than what was normal at the time, okay? And both British bands, they were doing a lot of things differently than a lot of the British bands at the time. And then all of a sudden, you blinked, and then you had King Crimson and Gentle Giant and Genesis and Yes and Emerson, Lake and Palmer and, Atomic Rooster and all this kind of stuff. So I think a lot of what the Moody Blues were doing, and other bands like the Beatles and what have you, where they were experimenting, and the Beatles were adding lots of psychedelia and, all sorts of different elements, in Middle Eastern themes into their music. And the Moody Blues were doing, these classical themes and these symphonic arrangements and things like that. That's kind of the genesis of prog rock, in my opinion. From David Bella. Pete, as you know, it takes quite a bit to make it in the music industry. Skill, great songs, dynamic members, great management, financial backing, timing, and of course a lot of luck. What bands through the 70s today do you feel had all the makings to be a huge band, but still didn't break out and become well-known, successful? Well, that's a great question, David. I think there's a difference between being well-known and being successful. The first artist that comes to mind is Alan Holdsworth. Alan Holdsworth, pretty well-known, at least among musicians, maybe not among the mainstream, but among, musicians and people who follow music, really well known. But was he ever really successful? Alan Holdsworth died basically penniless. He lived in poverty most of his life. And this is a guy that most, fellow musicians and, music aficionados look at as a absolute genius on the guitar. There's a lot of bands that, were fairly well known, but would you ever say they were really successful? Look at bands like, King Crimson, Gentle Giant. These are like, groundbreaking acts in prog rock. And yeah, most people know them, but were they ever really successful on a grand scale? Certainly not like Yes or Genesis or ELP or Rush. Not even close, right? I think, if you were to talk to the members of both Gentle Giant and King Crimson, they'd say, yeah, we're not wealthy by any means. We've struggled most of our lives, right? Well, maybe a couple guys in Gentle Giant are doing well for themselves now because of other ventures they've taken upon after the band broke up. But like I'm trying to think off the top of my head, some other bands who maybe were known but not really successful. Like Blood Rock. There's a couple questions about Blood Rock on the Southern Rock show. Toured with everybody, fairly popular band, but were they really that successful? No. Sir Lord Baltimore and Leaf Hound, very influential underground heavy rock bands, that a lot of people, they know about, but were they really successful? No. Influential? Certainly. Successful? No. So, we could probably do a whole show on bands that, most people know about. Most people may have an album or two, or at least know of them, but they never made any money. They weren't really successful. They didn't have any big hits. They didn't have any top 50 albums. And a lot of guys, Frank Marino's another guy. Frank Marino, Mahogany Rush. Most people in the 70s knew who Frank Marino was. He toured all over the place, opened up for the biggest bands, played the stadiums, right? And Frank will probably tell you himself that, I didn't make a lot of money in my career. Life is a struggle now as I haven't released a new album in a million years, can't really tour anymore. It's like, so while Frank Marino, among musicians and people who know about good music, Frank Marino is looked at as a true musical genius and a guitar god, but was he ever really, really successful? Not really. Okay, there are a lot of reasons for that. As David, I'm sure record labels have a lot to do with that. They kind of have these preconceived notions about who they want to be successful, who they're going to promote. So it's not always up to the artist, right? Who may be creating amazing music. They may be amazing players, but you know what? If the record labels and the music industry doesn't perceive that as something they want to push to the masses, you may not make it, right? So it's crazy. I know we covered some of this stuff in my recent rant on the music industry, but it's a really interesting topic, and it's a sad topic, unfortunately. From Michael Hudson, can you do a video where you pan through your entire CD collection? Well, that's going to take a while. All right, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. Here's what we're going to do here. Let's see how this works. All right. So I don't know how well this is going to come across, but let's see. Can you guys see any of this stuff here? I don't know how close we're going to get. I'm probably, all sorts of stuff. I've got a ton of things. There's Black Sabbath, your Bees, everything's alphabetical. Blue Oyster Cult, David Bowie, Boston, Budgie, got all my Deep Purple stuff down at the bottom. ELP, Eagles, Dream Theater, Dio, Dire Straits, Rory Gallagher, got all Genesis and Gentle Giant stuff, Ian Gillan, Golden Earring, a lot of Government Mule stuff sitting out because I'm running out of fucking room. Jimi Hendrix, Halloween, got Maiden and Jethro Tull, and this we could do this forever. We got Yes over here. What else we got? Got some Neil Moore stuff. You got all my Metallica, Mastodon, Max Webster, Metal Church, Moody Blues. We were just talking about the Moody Blues. There's a whole bunch of Moody Blues, Motorhead. You get the picture. Also, got all my wonderful guitars over there that I love to death. But I probably would need to do something a little bit different format-wise for that. But maybe one of these days I'll just get my cell phone and I'll just record like a little 5-minute video, just kind of going around everything. But you get the picture. I got a lot of stuff, and it's not everything I own behind me. Trust me. So where are we? From Jiff882, you don't do downloading. Would you make an exception for bands, artists whose albums aren't easy to come by? Well, I tell you, I haven't. To this day, I have yet to do that. Because generally speaking, you can find what you're looking for, right? But I think that let's fast forward a couple of years. Let's fast forward, like, say, 5 years from now. And basically, they're not producing CDs anymore, okay? But I'm hoping that doesn't happen because that's where all my stuff is invested in. But let's say down the road, the music industry is like, that's it. We're not making CDs anymore. Done. Dead. And there's some oddball things that I'm trying to track down and it's out of print. It's out of print. We're not making any more. It's a rare album, and I can't get it anywhere on CD. And CDs ain't coming back. Well, then I might, if it's available as a download, I might have to do that. Okay? I haven't had to do that as of yet. Okay? Thankfully. From Peter Veerwind. Hey, Pete, great show as always. I've got this time 2 questions for you. You know the special edition of Deep Purple's made in Japan with all 3 shows in Japan. I want to know which live album of one of your favorite bands would you like that they put out as they did with Made in Japan? All right, I'm going to answer that first. I'm going to say Robin Trower Live. That for me is one of my favorite live albums. Well, it is one of my favorite live albums, but more importantly, that's one of my favorite live albums that should have been a damn double album, because that was taken from a headline full, 90-minute set or whatever. And they truncated it to half that. And I know what he played on that tour, and a lot of it's not on that album. So I would love, and again, I know a lot of you are going to say, well, but there's the awesome King Biscuit Flower Hour live album, which has, more of that stuff. But I would like a 2-disc full show set from, whatever show or shows the Robin Trower live album is taken from. And I would like an entire double-disc live album. Okay, that's my choice. Second part of your question. I often like songs on an album that most people don't like and the bands don't play live. For example, my favorite song on Maiden's Number of the Beast is Invaders, and they have not played it live not once. Can you name 5 songs that you like from one of your favorite bands, but they don't play live? Thank you for answering, and keep up the good work. Greetings from the Netherlands. Okay, yeah, and I'm going to base this answer on when I've seen the band, or, like live albums and things like that. So, Deep Purple Speed King. I know they played Speed King a lot back in the day, way back when, but I've seen Purple a ton of times, and I've never seen them play Speed King. Okay, Black Sabbath, Snowblind. Again, probably played it live back in the day, but I have never seen Sabbath play Snowblind. Judas Priest, Island of Domination. Love to see him play that live. Rush, the Necromancer. Never going to happen, obviously. But and again, did they even play the Necromancer live way back when? I don't know. Would have loved to have heard it. And how about UFO, Pack It Up and Go from the Obsession album? That's my favorite UFO song, and or my second favorite UFO song, actually. And as far as I know, I don't know if they ever played that live. And that's a blistering track. Good question. From William Gainford. Hi, Pete. Great show as always, which just about redeems you from the epic fail of being seen live on YouTube in a Chicago t-shirt. Surely the uncoolest band ever. Even worse than my guilty pleasure, Supertramp. All right, William, how old are you? And feel free to answer in the comments, because I'm not trying to make fun of you. I'm really curious. Because that's to me a ridiculous comment, because that sounds to me like someone who has only heard and only knows about Chicago's early mid-'80s poppy ballads and schmaltzy singles. Okay, granted, that stuff is definitely uncool, but to label Chicago the uncoolest band ever, dude, come on. Have you not listened to their late 60s and most of their 70s output? There is nothing uncool about any of that stuff, okay? And you know what? There's nothing worse, nothing bad about Supertramp at all, okay? There's nothing bad about Supertramp. But I'm telling you, you really, before making comments like that, you really need to go and listen to all of their music, because I'm betting here that you haven't heard any of those first 6, 7 albums. I'm betting, because there's nothing uncool about any of that stuff. Nothing. Terry Kath, guitarist, there's nothing uncool about him. All right, so that's all I'm going to say on that. So, William, you got some homework to do. From Chet Greblowski. Pete, this is more speculation and opinion than a question. I was watching a Martin Popoff, love Martin, video where he was talking about the birth of heavy metal. He thinks it was 1970. I always considered Judas Priest Unleashed in the East the birth of metal. It was the first album with the look and sound of metal. To my ears, everything before was blues-based hard rock. I would like to hear your opinion. Okay, I'm actually seriously considering, after doing the History of Southern Rock show yesterday, I'm actually seriously considering doing the history of heavy metal. Okay, which, might have to do that in a couple parts, but basically what I want to do is to look at kind of like the birth of where heavy metal, where it kind of started, even though it wasn't called metal at the time, and that would be talking about a lot of the bands I'm going to mention in a minute, taking it through the 70s, okay, to where we really started to recognize the term heavy metal through the new wave of British heavy metal and all those American bands in the early 80s, the mid 80s with the introduction of thrash, and the early days of extreme metal and the more commercial or hair metal, whatever you want to call it, through to the creation of power metal and progressive metal and, new metal, go through the grunge era, the explosion of extreme metal, all that kind of stuff. So I'm thinking about doing something like that. But back to your question, where it began. Okay, I think the genesis, the birth of heavy metal, can be attributed to a bunch of bands. I don't know that there's one specific band. Cream, Jimi Hendrix, The Who, Blue Cheer. Okay, those are the really early ones, so let me get them. So not that you would listen to any of those and think heavy metal, but I mean, there are elements of what we later came to recognize as heavy metal music in songs like Sunshine of Your Love and Voodoo Child, okay? And a lot of the songs by The Who. You listen to some of that Live at Leeds album, which we were just talking about a couple days ago. I mean, that shit's pretty heavy, right? Blue Cheer, their first album, certainly. And then you got bands like, the Jeff Beck Group and Led Zeppelin and Deep Purple and Black Sabbath and Uriah Heep. And on a little more underground scale, Sir Lord Baltimore, okay? Budgie. I mean, that's heavy stuff. Really heavy. Mountain. That's really heavy stuff for the time. All right? And if it wasn't for all that music, what would have Judas Priest sounded like? Because Judas Priest came just after those bands. Because you listen to that first Judas Priest album, that's basically heavy blues rock, which is a lot of these bands are. But the metallic riffing, the use of fuzz and distortion, okay? Those lengthy guitar solos. That's like the birth of metal. But then metal as we know it, okay, with the leather and the chains and the spikes, Judas Priest, guys. And we're going to go a little earlier than Unleashed in the East because it started before then, 1976, Sad Wings of Destiny. That, to me, is the first official heavy metal album. You can say like some of those early Sabbath albums is where that kind of all began, but the first album that we can actually say, that's metal. That's the album right there. You listen to some of those songs, man. That kind of took what Sabbath and Purple and all those guys were doing one step further. Okay? But if it wasn't for those other bands, would Judas Priest have ever sounded like that? Would there even be a Judas Priest? Probably not, right? So, but I'm going to save more discussion of this for hopefully a future show because I think could have a lot of fun with that. From Drum Music Inc. We should be deep into the live album wars by the time you get around to answering this, but I was wondering, do you have any live albums that are your favorite records by that artist? A few that come to mind for me are Full House by the Jay Giles Band, Journey's Captured, and Thin Lizzy's Live and Dangerous. Not talking about considering the live album as their best, but your favorite. Thanks, and keep up the awesome work. I mean, that's a great question, Drum Music Inc. I would say for me, and again, I could probably spend a lot more time really going through all those live albums, but off the top of my head, Kiss Alive absolutely is my favorite Kiss record. Okay. It's probably close, but I think I will say that Grand Funk Railroad's live album, these guys, is probably my favorite Grand Funk album. It's close, but it's just such a great kick-ass live album. It's got so many of those great early tunes on them, and just the live versions are even better than the studio versions. I can easily say that Allman Brothers at the Fillmore is my favorite Allman Brothers album, although I love a lot of their studio albums. And, UFO Strangers in the Night, I almost have to say is my favorite UFO album. Even though I love, Lights Out and Obsession and, Force It and a lot of those albums. But I think that what makes Strangers so great is like it basically takes most of the really great tunes. It doesn't have everything, but it takes most of those great tunes from all those early Schenker albums and puts them on one platter. And those live versions are even better than the studio versions. So that almost by default becomes it. But that's a great question. I'm sure I can come up with more if I really thought about it. From Lonnie V. There are a few albums such as Boston's debut album and Sports by Huey Lewis and the News where every track was well known to the general public. Yeah, true. Even side one of Tom Petty's Damn the Torpedoes was hit after hit on it. Can you name any other albums in rock or prog that holds this distinction? Always enjoy all your video content. Thanks, Lonnie. I would say probably Paranoid by Black Sabbath. Easily Led Zeppelin 4, right? I mean, Jesus. God, we can name any number of Beatles albums. Jesus, I'm trying to think like Abbey Road, maybe, or God, you could pick a whole bunch of Beatles albums that like where the majority of the songs are really, really well known. How about Def Leppard's Pyromania? Right, that's most of that album is played on the radio, or just everybody knows those tunes. Pink Floyd, certainly, Dark Side of the Moon, Wish You Were Here. You know, what else? How about the Doors debut? Most of those tunes are pretty well known. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. Probably just look back. Maybe David Bowie's Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars. I mean, that's a really well known. Most of that album is played to death. What else? Jimi Hendrix Experience. Are You Experienced? That first album. Most of that stuff, right? What else? Oh, Fleetwood Mac Rumors. Come on, how can we forget about that? That's definitely one of them. Maybe even Eagles Hotel California. Okay. Those are some of the albums I think where, everybody knows every song on them for the most part, or at least 80% of it, right? So, good question. From T-Dog. Pete, great show as ever. A few years ago, I saw Alice Cooper at a day festival in London. He was obviously brilliant, but the most memorable act of the day was a band that really surprised me. I knew of Apocalyptica's existence, heavy metal cellos, yeah, I know them well, but thought it was a bit meh. However, they were incredible and completely blew me away. My question is, have you ever been surprised by the quality of the support act or preferred their performance to the headliners? Thanks in anticipation. T-Dog, yeah, I kind of answered this before, but I came up with another one that I didn't think about that I wanted to throw out there. So the one that I spoken about a couple times here on the channel is, and I'm thinking it was 1986, if I'm not mistaken. It was Metallica opening up for Ozzy Osbourne. It was the Bark at the Moon tour. It was the Master of Puppets tour. This is before Cliff was killed in the accident over in Scandinavia, and I had already liked Metallica a lot. But, this was Ozzy, right? And I was like, oh, Ozzy for me is, being a big Black Sabbath fan, the ultimate, right? But I really liked Metallica a lot at the time. So I was really looking forward to their set and just a great double bill. In fact, I think Wasted was also on the bill and they opened. They were the first band that came on. But man, I was not prepared for how fucking great Metallica was. I mean, and I had seen them before. This was not the first time I had seen Metallica. I saw them headline smaller venues before, but this was the first time seeing them in a big arena. This was the old Brendan Byrne Arena in East Rutherford, New Jersey, right next to Giant Stadium. And I was just dumbstruck by just how amazingly powerful they were, and they just blew everybody away. The place went fucking bananas for them. To the point where when Ozzy came on, Ozzy was really good, Jakey Lee on guitar and, the new lineup and all that kind of stuff. But it was kind of a letdown for me after Metallica. I mean, it's just like, they were a band at the time that you just could not follow. Okay. So that was one. Another one I think I'd mentioned before is, and again, this wasn't a surprise to me, but I went to go see Motley Crue and Whitesnake. And by this time I had already completely soured on Motley Crue, but I went because I was a huge Whitesnake fan, and Whitesnake had it was the tour of the 1987 album, so the whole band from that album was gone, and they had Vivian Campbell and Adrian Vandenberg and Rudy Sarzo and Tommy Aldridge, and with David Coverdale, so it was kind of like the new look band, but they completely destroyed Motley Crue. I was not surprised, and I was pretty happy about it. But the other band that came up when I was reading your question was, and this I didn't expect at all because I really didn't know who he was. I mean, I heard of him, but I went to go see Government Mule back in like the 96 somewhere time frame. I think it was Government Mule's first tour. I saw them at Irving Plaza in New York City, and Government Mule was a new band. Of course, I knew Warren and Alan from the Allman Brothers, but this is kind of like a new band. The new album had just come out, so I was into the new album and whatnot. But opening up was a young kid named Derek Trucks. okay, who is, of course, the nephew of Butch Trucks, drummer from the Allman Brothers Band. And I had heard of him, and I know he was getting a little bit of a buzz from his first solo album that he had put out, but I hadn't heard it, okay? And I remember going to that show, really looking forward to Government Mule, who played like for 4 hours that night, for a band that only had like one album out. Just played forever. It was awesome. But I was really impressed with Derek Trucks. And again, he was just really young and just, I think he was still like a teenager at the time, or late teens. And he blew me away. He was really, really good. And I started following him after that. And, before you know it, a few years later, Dickie Betts is out of the Allman Brothers Band, and who's in? Derek Trucks, right? So not very surprising, and he's made a great career for himself. Has got a lot of respect from fans and musicians and critics alike. So that was really cool to see. From Daniel Odermatt. Hi Pete, most of my favorite bands I saw live at least once in concert. Only UFO is sure missing in my collection, and now they are on their last tour in the USA. I live in Europe. Which band do you really love but never saw in concert? Well, the two that come off, obviously, well, two bands that I probably could have had a chance to go if I was just maybe, a couple years older. I never got to see Led Zeppelin, although I was going to get tickets to see them on the In Through the Outdoor tour. They had scheduled and announced a show at RFK Stadium in near Philadelphia. And I was going to go with some friends. We were going to have to take our parents, because this was like 1979 or whatever. We're going to drive us there. We were getting ready to get tickets, and then Bonham died, and the whole thing was scrapped. So I never got to see Led Zeppelin. The other band, and again, probably right around the same time they were doing their last tour or two, was Gentle Giant. But I really wasn't into. I had no idea who Gentle Giant was at the time. Those last couple of years of their existence, 78, 79, and 80, even though I was listening to a lot of music, I had no idea who Gentle Giant was. They played around New York quite a bit, but I never got to see them, unfortunately. And then by the time I started to get into prog, they were obviously already retired as a band. So those are the two that come off the top of my head. I mean, I've seen basically every other band that I ever wanted to see. I don't really have any more bucket list bands to my knowledge, or like bands that are still around that I love and I've never gotten to see that I can think of. Yeah, I don't think there's any left. I really don't think there's any left. From where are we here? From Matty Boy Walker. Do you ever think we will hear from Rod Evans again? And what do you think led him to joining the bogus Deep Purple group, as they weren't even playing any songs from the Mark I era? Yeah, that was just like a travesty. What a fucking joke, right? As far as will we ever hear from Rod Evans again? I mean, we haven't heard from Rod Evans in a long, long time. He didn't even bother to respond or come out to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction ceremony. I don't know. I mean, I've done some research on this to find out, see where is Rod Evans these days, and you can scour the internet. And I don't think anybody knows anywhere what the hell he's been doing for the last 30 plus years. As far as that ridiculous, bogus Deep Purple thing, I mean, that was, whoever that promoter was obviously a piece of garbage, right? But, people will do strange things to make money, right? So, of course, there was no Deep Purple at the time. They were broken up. This was before the reunion for Perfect Strangers. And there, of course, was a demand for Deep Purple. And I guess at the time, Rod Evans hadn't been Captain Beyond in a few years, so he's got nothing going on. And somehow they got in touch with him, and I was like, hey, would you be interested in putting together a new, new Deep Purple, since there is no Deep Purple right now? I don't even remember who the other guys were in this band they put together. I really don't know. And but I mean, they just totally scammed the public. They went out as like, oh, Deep Purple back together, or whatever, and it's Rod Evans and a bunch of nobodies. I mean, that was like the biggest scam ever. Biggest scam ever. And he had to have been really hard up for money to take on something like that. I'm sure he regrets it. And maybe that's the reason why he just disappeared off the face of the earth. He's like, you know what? After that fucking embarrassment, I'm out of here. I'm going incognito. Done. Bad mistakes come back to haunt you, people, in all aspects of life. Words to live by. From Tate Davis. Hey, Pete, I don't think that you have mentioned your opinion on this, but what do you think of artists nowadays releasing extended plays as a first release as opposed to a full studio album? I find that it is a good thing because of our society's short attention span. People can enjoy more than one song by the artist, but not the length of the full album. I am an album guy myself, but I just want to hear your thoughts on this topic. Well, I mean, I don't mind it as such. I mean, there have been a lot of bands throughout the years that did that. I mean, just go back, to like when I was young, that first Queensryche release, right? That was an EP. That was a great introduction to the band. I think more bands do it nowadays because there's just this kind of backlash on creating albums anymore, right? Especially for a lot of the younger bands. They're just like, why are we going to make a full album? Nobody buys albums anymore. Let's just put out, let's just record a handful of songs and maybe we'll, release that as a download EP or, we'll print up a few CDs and, whatever. And it's cool. I don't really mind that too much. I'll tell you what I do mind. I do mind when bands, whether it's new bands or existing bands, release like an EP, 3-4 songs. Okay, here's our new EP. Great. And they release that. And then like 6 months, 8 months, a year later, they released a new full-length album that has all those EP tracks on it. When you've already purchased that, and now you got to buy them again. That I don't like. Okay? And I see that a lot. And that I wish would stop. It's like, what, if you're going to release an EP, a standalone EP, leave it as such. And then, whenever you're going to release another full length, put all new stuff on there. Because and I understand it's a way to get additional cash and all that kind of stuff. And I see a lot of bands, like I see this all the time, like a lot of European, like power metal bands and what have you. They'll release like, we're releasing a maxi single or 7-inch or extended EP, and it's got like 1 or 2 new tracks and a couple live tracks, whatever, and this is like a teaser for an upcoming album. So you go out and you purchase that stuff and you're like, this is great new studio track or tracks, a couple good live ones, and then the new album comes out and it's got the studio tracks are on there too, and it's just like, man. So yeah, so in one aspect I don't mind it too much, and the other it's just like, come on. And on the same topic, it's like what I really hate even more is when bands, and I know this a lot of times, this is the record labels pushing this, when bands release a new album in a single disc version, then they release a deluxe edition, which is basically the same album, maybe 2 bonus tracks and like a companion, documentary and maybe a couple live tracks, and then a super deluxe, which has like, a bonus live disc. And it's just like, for fuck's sake, man. It's like, how many times are you going to want to get money from us on the same freaking album? You see that a lot too. It's just like, drives me nuts. Patrick Michaels was rewatching your greatest debut albums, and one of your choices was Rush's first album with their original drummer. Since you like it so much, it got me thinking about the future of Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson. What about a reunion tour with the first drummer? They could do the first album or possibly make new music together since Neil has retired. It's not like they had bad blood or anything, or is there? What's your thoughts on this, Pete? Well, Patrick, John Rutsey died in 2008. So I don't think that's possible. Do your research, my friend. Yeah, he's been gone for well over a decade. May he rest in peace. Last question from Chris Samardich. Pete, it's Chris Brotherhood of Light Show. Question: what is the best way to navigate the 3 Sea of Tranquility sites? Example: I see an album more pop up, then I have to go to the Sea of Tranquility Facebook site to vote on it before I listen to your review. Usually around the beginning of the week, I'm looking for the questions and answers. I go onto YouTube, and it's in this massive hodgepodge of videos. Then I go to the website to look up album reviews. Is there a design, rhyme, or reason to your layout of these 3 different media sites? Do you have a suggested way to navigate your sites? Thanks, Chris. Okay, all right. This is a great question, and you're not the first person who's asked this. So, it's a little different nowadays. Back 5 years ago, all I had was www.seatranquility.org, right? It's very easy to navigate through there. You got, the main reviews page, which has album reviews and, DVD reviews and book reviews, all that kind of stuff. You got the main page, which has links to interviews, editorials, live concert reviews, all that kind of stuff. Well, eventually we got a Facebook page. The Facebook page has always been just a way to promote stuff that's either been posted on the webzine or post links to videos on the YouTube channel. Okay, that's basically the purpose of Facebook. Although, however, this year we've been doing like all these album war polls, which is a great way to just kind of get people engaged, right? talking about albums, voting on albums, all that kind of stuff, as well as for us to keep track of winners of albums, polls, and all that kind of nonsense, which we're going to be doing going forward. But also, like I said, we will post links on Facebook for people who maybe have not subscribed to the YouTube channel. So the best way to kind of navigate through all this stuff, first of all, Chris, if you subscribe to the YouTube channel and click that little bell next to the subscribe button, that will send you an email every time I post a new video. Okay? So you get alerted. You don't have to go to the YouTube channel and sift through videos. All right? So that's what I would recommend doing. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel and click on the notification button, because then you'll get a nice email saying, new content has been posted, new questions and answers show. And then you can click right from there, go right to the show. But in addition, on the YouTube channel, okay, I've created playlists for everything. I got a whole bunch of people like a year and a half ago who asked me to create playlists because they can never find what they're looking for on the channel. So I go to great lengths to organize everything in the playlist. And the funny thing is, hardly anybody uses it. But I continue to organize stuff. Go to the playlist. I've created a playlist for every show type on the platform. So there's a playlist for questions and answers. There's a playlist for top 10 songs. There's a playlist for the new product shows. There's a playlist for the history of shows. There's a playlist for the classic album war shows. There's a playlist for interviews. There's a playlist for, you name it. I got playlists for everything on there. So it's very easy to then go into the playlist and find exactly what you're looking for. Okay. In addition, if you click on our main video page on the YouTube channel, click on the videos tab, that will give you all the videos in the order that they've been posted. So the ones at the top are always going to be the most recent ones, and you can just kind of scroll down. But my guess is if you like specific shows on this channel and that's what you're most interested in, you should definitely go to the playlist every week and go see what's newly been added to the playlist. But more importantly, subscribe and click on the notifications button. This way you'll get notified every time we post something new. Okay? That's your best way to navigate stuff. All right? As far as the polls on the Facebook page, I post those every single morning. So your best bet is to just, make sure you have liked our Facebook page, and we should show up in your feed every morning when we post the new polls. Okay? It's the best thing you can do. All right? I know it's a lot, but that's social media for you. Anyway, that's the show. Visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. Of course, we're here on YouTube every damn day. So, guys, I'm hoping I can do it today, but if not, it'll be tomorrow morning. This month is actually our 5-year anniversary here on YouTube. Pretty cool, right? It went fast. I will say it went fast. And the last year has just been incredible. So we are, and I'm going to leave all this for the 5-year anniversary. I'm going to do a 5-year anniversary show. What I originally wanted to do, I just haven't been able. It's so hard to schedule when you got working with other people. But what I originally wanted to do for a 5-year anniversary show is to get a lot of the guys who have appeared on my show together and do like a kind of like a panel discussion. I still am going to do that at some point. I just have to figure out how, where, and when to get this to make it happen, right? So that's going to be for a later date. It might still be kind of like a celebration type show if I can get everybody together. That's going to be the fun part of it. But if not, we'll do the best we can. But I'm going to do like a separate, like I say, either later today or tomorrow, 5-year anniversary show, just kind of like talking about all we've been through together on this channel. Call out some of the people who have helped a lot and guest starred on the channel and all that kind of fun stuff, because it's been cool, right? It's been, for me, it's been a lot of fun. This is a labor of love for me. I really enjoyed doing this, and I'm glad so many people get enjoyment out of hearing me just kind of pontificate and talk about music that I love, because that's really, it's why I do it. I do it just because I love the music so much. I do it because I want to give exposure to all these great bands, past, present, and future, who do so much to give us so much enjoyment. So this show is really just about and for them, and for you guys who are constantly looking for new music to enrich in your lives with. So I'm very happy to kind of spread the love that I've gotten from this music to everybody else. That's really why I do this. So I'm going to do a quick little, video just kind of talking about the 5 years and what we've been through and all this kind of stuff. So that's coming up too. All right. So stay tuned, and we'll talk to you guys real soon. Bye-bye.